lost it.
I'm sorry. Who made? Sorry. Jamie. Jamie made the motion. Donna seconded. All in favor? Aye. Voting. Jamie made the motion. Donna seconded.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am.
You approve the agenda?
Mr.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Approve the agenda? You vote to approve.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, approve the agenda? Technical difficulties.
Remember they had that last.
Yeah, I lost you for a couple minutes and then you came back.
You hear us now?
Oh yeah, you guys are loud and clear now. I can hear it playing in the background as well. Yeah, I lost you for a couple minutes.
All right, I'm gonna turn the mics off and bring back.
Can you hear us now? I look for approval of the April 28th and May 17th meeting minutes.
I'll move they be approved as distributed.
I look for approval of the April 28th and May 17th meeting minutes. Do I have a?
Hey, Bob, do you mind if we do these separately? Do you mind if we do the minutes separately? Approve them?
That's what we were just doing.
Pardon?
No, I made
Oh, okay.
you asked for
Oh, you mean you want to do 28 separate from 7? From the 17th?
That's what he's saying.
Okay. Are we already?
We already got a motion.
Is
Okay.
that the mayor? Or is that just feedback?
Donna, you make a motion to approve the April 28th minutes?
Yes, I will amend it to read April 28th minutes as distributed.
Do I have a second?
I would second it.
Jamie made a second for the April 28th meeting minutes. Now look for approval for the May 17th.
Vote,
Oops, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mayor Mark? All in favor? Opposed? Mayor Mark?
Get it to stop.
Okay, Missy?
You can give it a try, otherwise I can go see if I can get all of
I
Chad.
look for approval of the May 17th, 2022 meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve May 17th minutes.
I'll second.
Jay made a motion to accept them. Approval of May 17th, 2022 meeting minutes. Jason approved. Donna seconded. Jay made a motion to accept them.
May 17th, you've got me listed as a member. And I am not.
Where are you?
In the
May
minutes, you got
17th,
him as
Oh, in the
as
minutes?
a member.
And I am not a member of the planning commission.
Okay.
I don't know what to do about that.
Well, you'll just have to
You just don't vote, that's all, I guess.
I'll fix that.
You just-
All in favor of the May 17th meeting minutes
Aye.
with a correction of removing Mike Barrington from the voting? Jay- Who made the motion?
Jay did.
Jay made the motion.
Donna seconded.
Donna seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion, meetings are approved.
Okay, I'll remind me to fix that now.
Can I interrupt for just a second? Missy, are you broadcasting on YouTube? If you are, silent,
Broadcasted on YouTube.
mute the YouTube, please.
Should we just shut that feedback off? We're gonna have to shut that off, Missy.
Shut the YouTube.
No, you can leave the YouTube on, just mute it. No, you can leave the YouTube on, just mute it.
Okay.
Sounds better.
Okay, we're done then.
Give it a try.
Dave, you want to take the CSM?
I do.
Oh.
Missy, can you bring up that CSM? So this was kind of a tricky proposition. We've got some non-conforming properties that were involved in this land split and acquisition. The gentleman that lives on Lot 1 was going to purchase that building there on Lot 2. Based on our ordinance, I couldn't have him add it to his property and combine it because it would give him two accessory structures. Since it was a non-conforming anyway, I decided that it'd probably be better to, if you look at, can you go to the other picture real quick, Missy? So on the current layout in the bottom right corner where Lot 1 is, see how that angle runs across that property? We decided to square that off to give there enough access to access that building on Lot 2. So if you go back to the other slide, you can see where we had to square that off to allow an access to get to that structure. So that's going to be a standalone, even though it's on, doesn't have a primary structure. Since it was already non-conforming, I thought that was the least issue going against our current zoning ordinance. And then
What do you mean by non-conforming? What is that?
it doesn't meet our current zoning ordinance. So you're not supposed to have what's called an accessory structure unless you have a primary use, which would have been a house, obviously. So decided to leave that kind of on a standalone. And then that back property there, Lot 3, the gentleman's going to purchase that, is going to also buy that building next to the one by Lot 2 there. So after looking this over several different ways, this is what I came up with to probably have it work the best with the less impact based on our current zoning ordinance.
Three will
So
be non-conforming as well with that structure.
if it's an ag building, no, because that's ag property behind there and it's used as ag. So if they use that for ag equipment for, tractors and, store equipment for the ag use, yes. If he had personal stuff in there, technically it would be outside what the ordinance would allow, but I think it's going to be an ag use on that building, so that would meet our current ordinance for ag.
Is the plan to build a house or anything on Lot 3? Is there any plans for that in the future?
No.
Just one, you really couldn't because there must be no driveway.
So the gentleman on Lot 1 is selling and moving. he wants to keep lot 2 there. He runs a landscape business. And basically he's been leasing that for quite a while and he's just going to purchase that. The owner that lives, I can't see the address
west.
on this picture.
Or to the north. To the
Yeah,
north of him.
he's the one selling out. He used to do a lot of excavating and stuff and he's getting out of business. So he's selling off some of his assets.
Everybody know where this is?
Yeah.
Starshers, right?
Darshner.
So even though we're going to end up with one non-conforming lot, we already had basically 2 non-conforming lots. So I think this is the least objective to our current ordinance. So I'm recommending approval of the CSM.
So all 3 of them lots were his to begin with, correct?
Or what?
Were all 3 of them lots?
It was his old house. That was
Yeah.
Dorshner's original house.
Okay.
That would have been lot 1.
And that's going to kind of remain intact other than I had to square that off. So it'll allow access to that other building.
What would the zoning be for lot 3?
I don't recall what it is over there.
I mean, could that ever be, I just worried like if somebody ever bought that and wanted to build a house on that, would that be a problem in the,
They still could.
where would the driveway?
Well, you couldn't because you couldn't put it out in front of the building. So no, it wouldn't be. So they'd have to,
You'd have to buy the front lots in order to build on the back.
Yeah.
If he owned lot 2, he could build a house. If he owns 2 and 3, he would be able to build a house.
I'm not sure you could build one out behind the existing structure there based on
Oh.
our ordinance.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be a little tricky.
That's
So
what you're asking?
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
just looking ahead in the
Yeah.
future, like if that was,
Sure.
Probably have to tear that other building down to be able to put a house in the back.
if they wanted to build there, yeah, or move it to the back of the property.
And you don't see any problems with this?
That it's a lesser of couple evils. Like I said, we already had 2 non-conforming before we even got started, so we're going to end up with 1. So, like I said, based on our ordinance, this is about one of the only options that I could come up with. I thought that could kind of work.
So there's another purchase taking place for lot 3, and then that parcel of the back is
Correct.
being transferred from the lot 2 to the lot 3. Is that my understanding?
Yep, currently lot 3 on the current layout
Yeah.
is going to be incorporated into the entire lot 3. It'll all be one parcel.
Okay.
And he's got enough room on the side of that building to access that back lot without infringing on the other property.
You know that, Donna? I would look for a motion then to approve the CSM for the Montgomery Street properties.
I'll make a motion.
Jay makes a motion. Do I have a second?
I would second it.
Jamie has a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
The rest of the ultimate can vote, but we can't make them.
Front yard fence proposal, Dave.
Yes. So we do have a fence proposal for 327 North Shawano.
I have a question on 327. We already approved a fence back in October for that address. Is this a change to that?
I don't remember that being on the agenda back
I don't
then
think we ever
It's in the
approved.
minutes.
for October
Yeah.
of last year.
Yep. The zoning administrator explained a request for a picket fence located in the front yard at 327 North Shawano, provided a drawing showing proposed location. A motion was made by Gabert and seconded by myself to approve the installation of the fence.
So,
Carried by all. That was in October 28th minutes, 2021.
so he's adding some chain link as well.
Okay.
Down both sides. I told him we couldn't have the picket there because it would create a vision obstruction. So it's probably just for the chain link fence that'll technically be out in the front yard. So,
Okay. That was my question.
yep. So I did take a couple pictures. We've had some questions in the past on whether proposed fence would create some type of vision obstruction. So I parked in the driveway adjacent to this fence to show that you've got a pretty clear access to traffic coming in from the north and southbound. And then he's going to put black chain link fence back angling toward the front of the house there. So I guess we're looking to approve the chain link portion of this fence since the picket's already been approved.
Anybody have any questions?
I think that picket actually, I mean, I didn't realize that was approved in October, but that's kind of, that blocks vision. If you come out of that car dealer,
Stay new.
Back to original.
back to original, and you want to take a left, that's right in, that's a pretty good block of your vision. Where that picket fence is right now.
We approved that one already?
We approved the picket already.
Okay. Yeah.
There is some parking along that side of the parking lot, I notice.
Yeah,
So
cars
cars
are back.
likely you'd have a car there anyway. So I don't think the fence would contribute to that. And you can kind of nose out enough to see to your left before your front of your vehicle gets out into traffic.
Well, seeing we already approved the picket fence, I guess we're not talking about that then. So we're talking about approving the chain link fence. Anybody have any questions on that? And that's on the north side of the building, correct? Of his house, between the two buildings?
The chain link will
Chain
be on the north and south
Right.
property lines, correct?
Okay. Look for a motion to approve the chain link fence?
Did you say north and south?
No, north end.
Oh, north end.
Yeah.
You did say north and south.
Basically coming back from each edge of that picket fence that's
Okay,
there.
Okay.
How tall is that chain link? Is that going to be 4 feet?
It's going to be 4 feet. It's that see-through black.
Do I have a motion to approve the chain link fence? No motion, I guess, what is it, die for a
It
lack
dies
of,
if there's no motion.
huh?
It dies if.
Dies
there's no
for lack of no motion. Okay.
Okay. All right, we have one more fence proposal. It's 715 West Millard.
Just to be clear, that last motion died, correct?
Yep.
Yep.
They
Right.
made a motion.
All right, on this one, the owner contacted me, wants to come out from the corner of the house approximately 15 feet, square across the front there inside the right-of-way line, and then up the property line. The closest driveway to that fence is about 60 foot away, so there won't be a vision obstruction there. And there's quite a bit of space between where the fence would end and the roadway begins, so it's just to grab a little bit more yard for them so they can use that space.
That fence can't be on the property line, correct?
It'll run across along the property line on that,
It's got
yeah,
to be set back, right? Can't be
Yeah,
put
a
on the
foot.
property line.
yeah, just a foot. And that's what we're doing there, so. And then there'll be other fence in the backyard, but we just have to look at that fence out past the front edge of the house there. And the same style fence, it's a chain link fence.
The people that own the property are here if anybody has any questions. Used to are for the fence, correct?
I am.
Right?
No, I don't. I just want to see what you guys have to say about that. If there's going to be any issues with it.
Does anybody have any questions? Hearing no questions, I guess I would look for a motion to approve the fence at 715 West Miller.
I would make that motion.
Amy made the motion.
I'll second.
Mark Mayor made the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay.
Okay. Gentlemen, that was here last month. We weren't.
Nice day for a drive. So you ladies understand that motion was passed?
Okay.
Glad to see everybody here today.
Yeah.
So, well, good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Eric Fowle of Cedar Corporation, and we're just kind of getting into details on the comprehensive plan. For those of you who remember when we did the land use element and updated that, we took some time with the committee to go through all the existing policies, the goals, those kind of things, to ensure that they're kind of aligned and in direction with where the community wants to go. We're going to do the same thing here and kind of through a couple of chapters, hopefully at each meeting, go through sort of that important stuff and just find out what direction you may want to go. We're not going to spend a lot of time wordsmithing every statement in there. We'll play around with some of those things, but we'll want to make this efficient, obviously, at the committee level. Before we do that, though, I wanted to quickly run through the SWOT analysis. I trust everyone had gotten this and had a chance to look at it. We took about a half hour at that one meeting to go through the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you can see how things kind of parsed out in terms of total number of votes, what was most important. I think there's some interesting things in here, nothing shocking by any means from what I know of the community, but certainly with the strengths, the fact that you've got capacity available, you've got the history of the water resources, a lot of that really leads to setting yourself apart from other communities. With the electricity, the term resiliency comes to mind, which I think is on more and more people's minds in terms of increased storms and storm damage and flooding and all those types of things. So I think using that in the sense of resiliency and that you've got a good system here is something that you can market. A question I had, and I don't know if anyone in the room knows this, but is the utility looking at or doing anything towards the renewable energy end of things?
We partner with WPPI,
Okay.
and our position is that's where we purchase our power from.
Okay.
So when people ask us if we do renewable, we do through WPPI. Through our tariff, we're subjected to limit the amount because if we do a large solar project, we're limited by our tariff to, we can't be generation. So we would actually be penalized. So the Point Beach Solar, that's actually a project that we support because
Okay, so you've got to get that renewable secondary. You can't be a primary
Correct.
installer. Okay, that's good to know and what I was looking for. So appreciate the answer there. Obviously, a lot of comments about the river and the water resources. And for those of you that might remember, it was almost 5 years ago. I was here under my former hat and we did a riverfront visioning session. It was well attended. And I went back and looked at that and was really kind of amazed at some of the statements that were generated by participants about what the community could be in the future. Just quickly, great community to live, work, and play, more stores, niche businesses, riverfront destination, mecca for entertainment, more restaurants, increased quality of life, keep riverfront eco, natural, walking, biking, snowmobile trails. A lot of that's kind of contained in here yet. I was going to say, so what do you guys do in the last 5 years? Advance any of those things? I don't know. But obviously they're still important for the committee here. And I'm sure when we do the survey, those things are probably going to still come out fairly strongly. So on the weaknesses, certainly noted a number of things, some which may be beyond your control in terms of housing costs and availability. We made some adjustments in the land use element to address that a little bit. We'll certainly talk more about those things. Highway 15 certainly is going to have an impact. We're not quite sure to what extent at this point, but again, that could be an additional marketing device in terms of accessibility to the area. We talked about downtown and being too close to the valley, and you're about to get closer with 15 being approved, essentially. So some good observations there, and I think some things we can play with in terms of ideas. Opportunities, a number of the things that I mentioned before about developing more business, wildlife, recreation as a draw, the quality of life. You've got some new opportunities perhaps to the north, also to the south, obviously with Highway 15. And I'm not going to argue with anyone on need for a winery, distillery, or brewery. Maybe more than one would be fine. Threats as well. You recognize the 15 could end up impacting traffic a little bit in business. Access should be fairly similar when that gets completed, but you never know until things open up. some notes about apathy within the community, and it's just difficult to get people to engage, satisfied with the same old, same old. So obviously you folks know some things need to change. And then really a few things out of the control of any of us with respect to inflation and regulations. But I guess in those instances, we just need to be ready to adapt. But I think this is good stuff. And this is real helpful for when we started generating the survey. And we'll talk about that more towards the end. I'm not sure if anyone else had any comments or observations or things they wanted to point out or mention.
One of the things we had in a discussion after that I think needs to be highlighted a little more is the resources we have, our police and our street department and some of our other things in our community. We kind of overlook them because I think they're so strong, and it's easy to complain about things, but it's hard to really acknowledge where we excel. And I think our police and fire department excel as well. So I think we didn't highlight that enough in our relay of this survey. So that's one of the things I kind of wanted to note, because we all kind of thought of it afterwards. We're like, wow, you know, our police and fire department are second to none as well. We really wish we would have recognized them a little more in this survey.
No, that's a good point. I appreciate you mentioning that, and we can certainly do that as we progress here. It's hard to hit on everything, obviously, but you must have heard it from one of those guys when they saw that. But no, that's good. And again, if those are some assets in your communities as compared to others that you do better in a lot of those things, that's something to market as well.
Utilities as well. He didn't mention that, but a lot of people lost power around this area, and they had everybody pretty much back on unless they had a tree fall right on their service.
Yeah.
So they weren't without power very long.
I didn't hear the extent of damage here. It sounded like things kind of started here and went to the northeast, but
It was pretty widespread.
Yeah, we were fortunate though. We had enough, but it wasn't terrible.
yeah, I haven't hit a few times in the last number of years, so. Any other comments or thoughts about these items? We don't have to dwell on it. This will be part of an appendix as part of the issues and opportunities, so it'll be there and we can look at it later, but it does give us a lot to work with, and I think aligns well actually with a lot of things you already have in your plan. So we can move on then to the transportation element, and again, I'm not going to go through this page by page, paragraph by paragraph. All of the information in both of these chapters has been updated to the best of our knowledge. We're using the same format as that land use chapter. A lot of this stuff was pulled from the old plan, which was part of that group effort done under Waupaca County, and not as quick and simple as I thought to cut and paste some stuff. It's really taken a while to make this specific to the city and pulling all that information out of there. But I think maybe just a couple of things to point out. Page 4 has a copy, an updated road classification map, and those are important in terms of the types of facilities that exist and what they can handle for traffic and accommodation. So from a land use perspective, we obviously want to be aware of that and be cognizant when we're looking at major developments going in. Didn't hear a lot through up to this point of major issues with various intersections or segments of street. But if those things come up, we can certainly kind of look at those. Page 5, the table there, I actually realized after rereading this that I need to clarify that. Just want to ensure that there's a previous number given that there are 49.71 miles of local roadways that the city's maintained. This reflects the number of those that are designated on the functional class system. So if you saw that 18.56 miles and wondered why isn't that add up to 49, that's the reason. So I've got a note here just to clarify that. But I don't think there's really anything overwhelming in terms of changes, in terms of traffic. Obviously, you do all you can to maintain the roads and the facilities. We've got state project going on here. Over recent years, we've addressed motor ATVs and UTVs and assigned some routes. And I think perhaps maybe the biggest change over the time period since the last plan is, my guess is you've probably had more conversations about bicycle and pedestrian corridors and facilities and desires to have that, or there's some safety issues. So we're finding that happening in a lot of communities. By the way, does the city have an official sidewalk policy? I didn't have a chance to look, but question came to mind. If you've got a new development going in, do you require sidewalks in a new subdivision?
I believe the new developments do require it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you go back at any time when you're doing street reconstructions and segments that don't have sidewalk? Do you put them in, or?
That I don't
leave
know
that
if they
alone?
have that in their plan. I know they upkeep the ones they have, but
I just noticed going through town, it's a bit spotty. There are
Yep.
some areas that don't have it. It sort of goes with the age of development, maybe starting in the 50s or 60s. Some of that didn't have sidewalks. I didn't know if that continued on as a pattern.
We were
think
going to
it
have
one-
some, go ahead, Mike.
I think at one time when we started some of this stuff, we tried to maintain that they had sidewalks on at least one side of the street. You know, when we did Division Street, we had sidewalks.
Yeah, going up all the way up to Beckert Road,
Yes.
because there was no sidewalk on on either side of the street. And when we rebuilt Division Street, they run the sidewalk all the way up to the St. Joe's.
So there's some opportunities
Yeah.
there.
And we had
Connections.
looked at a safe walk to school that we were going to do, and boy, the people just jumped all over us when they wanted to put a sidewalk on their street because they didn't want all these people walking in front of their house. So that kind of got pushed someplace.
I can research that a little bit for you too.
Okay, I'll keep that as a question, and I'm gonna have some other ones that I get deeper into the community facilities too, but I'll reach out to you, Dave, first, and then we can coordinate. Why don't we just move on to the statements here, because I think this is where we'll get most of the conversation. Did anyone have any questions or anything that jumped out of them in sort of that inventory section? Or see anything that was incorrect or that you question? Not, that's good. If you find something, we've got time and we can make changes or address those items. But starting on page 16, we've got the transportation goals and objectives. And obviously, I've given these a pretty close read through. Many of them, I think, are still very applicable and worded in a manner where they provide enough guidance and direction. I think on the 3 goals that are listed on page 17, just a couple of questions that I have to ensure that we're addressing things appropriately. Particularly now with the cost of roads and construction. Has there been any talk in the past about what your road widths are, your standard road widths, and any desire to look at reducing them in any way, shape, or form?
Just the Main Street, when we were talking about the Main Street project, there's going to be some changes in the size of that.
But in terms of new development going in, you stick with your same standards, or have you?
Yeah, I haven't heard of anything on them.
I believe we go with the DOT recommendations.
We're finding that more and more communities have found that they've been overbuilding, a lot of these residential streets, and you really need parking on 2 sides and vast amounts of pavement, and particularly because of the cost, the maintenance, stormwater, and those things. So we can look at that a little more and take a look at your standards and see if there's something we might want to suggest, and we can certainly discuss that more. But it may make sense from a policy perspective for a number of reasons. Can slow traffic down as well, just the way corridors and the width visually people react. When you're driving on something that was designed for 55 and it's posted at 35, and you're just kind of anxious about it. So under goal 2, 2C, that talked about exploring the need for transit options, particularly for senior residents. I know from doing a little bit of initial work on the community facilities that there are a number of different services. This was prepared quite a number of years ago, so I don't know if there's any thoughts or knowledge that you might have on whether there's enough transit available or is there too little and a need for more. Obviously, like most communities, you've got an aging population. But does anyone have any sense on that?
Ginger Arndt is our lady that takes care of our senior boss. She would have a lot more positive numbers for you.
Okay.
To give you a better answer, we can get that too.
Yeah, I'll write that down. Certainly if someone I can contact and get a little feedback from, that's fine.
She's our park and rec director.
But as I read these kind of statements, I often pick out things that look like more of an action-oriented thing and just want to know, is that still true? Was progress been made on those items? On the third goal, 3D, maintain adequate public parking facilities. I guess the question I had was, at least in the downtown area, does the city own a number of the lots or some of these large lots behind the buildings, or those are all private owned?
We, downtown Main Street, we have the parking lot back there. We just acquired a green spot on Main Street that is in between the buildings. But I don't believe we own a lot of them, no.
Okay.
I think most of the parking lots are private
Yes.
behind the building.
You know, first impression, I remember the first time I came to the community too and went back there, it just seemed like, wow, there's a lot of expansive parking back here and the way things were laid out. Can I assume that there's more than sufficient parking?
No.
Or is
No,
more
we
needed?
need, parking is definitely an issue.
It is, okay. Good to know.
That lot that we just acquired was acquired for parking, so. I think, anybody in here remember the number? I think there's like 15 stalls.
That sounds like 14, 15, 16,
Yeah.
sounds like
Okay.
the number.
They haven't given a real
Kind of
solid number.
preliminary, yeah.
Yeah, 14 to 16 is what
Yeah.
They're still working on design because we're
Oh, yeah.
working with Chad to relocate some facilities to accommodate some parking stalls there. So it's, whether it's going to be diagonal or straight on is, it's
Noth-
still under.
Yeah, nothing
design.
solid, just that was kind of a good number to throw out, about an average.
That's fine. Has the city ever done or been part of an official parking study, a detailed parking study of the whole downtown area?
I
Really?
do not think so, other than our downtown revitalization project for Main Street. We kind of dabbled with that a little bit.
Okay.
When we talking about the width of the road and doing one way or parallel parking or angle parking, that
Right.
kind of stuff, but
Yeah, much like Wapaka did in their downtown.
Exactly,
They're
we-
going through looking at everything.
we
Some
actually-
people hated this and they like this.
we actually brought them in and talked to them about their design and stuff and how they liked what they did and whatnot.
Okay, no, that's good. And that certainly will help a bit, but good to know that there's still some parking issues and we'll make note of that and see what we might be able to put in the plan to provide some guidance on that. Any other comments or questions folks had or things you want to talk about based on those three goals? That will kind of move on to the policies and recommendations. You've got these set up consistently in your documents as a city position, a city directive, and then development review criteria. It's somewhat unique to other plans that I've seen, but it seems to work, and we're not really going to mess around with the structure on this unless someone really feels otherwise. I think most of these statements that exist in here are still pretty common sense and provide a fair amount of guidance in terms of how to handle a number of things regarding transportation. There's nothing that's really changed out there that would alter a lot of the statements under that city position. I think same thing under city directive. I did note, and one thing I found out kind of just late as I was pulling this together was that you did have a Safe Routes to School action plan that was completed and updated in March of this year. And so I got my hands on that and I'll be looking at that and we'll integrate any recommendations that we find in there that make reference to that plan within this transportation section somewhere. Under the development review criteria, the first couple there made me think, do you have an official map? I saw a reference to one somewhere in a date of 1972, but do you have an official map that you keep current and up to date?
Of the city?
Yes, official street map. It's a legally binding.
I do believe that we have that. Our street superintendent would have that.
Okay.
Luke Ammons.
Okay. I can certainly talk more to him about that. We often find that that's an underutilized tool by communities. Typically, it's used simply to mark out existing roads and future roads. And you can basically reserve that right of way by placing it on the official map, which then legally prevents any development proposals. Someone wants to build a garage or a shed or a subdivision for that matter. They can't block that area. You know, it's reserved for that street. But you can also put trails and future trails, stormwater facilities, parks as features on those maps. And so as we look particularly to new lands to develop in, it's worthwhile thinking in a little more detail about those areas and the spaces that you need to protect and preserve for basically infrastructure, if you will. So I'll talk to Luke about that and see what you have on hand and what we can glean from that. But I think we might want to be looking at including some additional recommendations on the use of the official map as part of this process. Any comments or questions on page 18, stuff we just went through? I'm going to move kind of quick here, so do jump in if there's something critical. Page 19, I like number T11 at the top there. It really ties into the land use element that we just completed in terms of doing area development plans for smaller scale areas. Residential subdivisions under T12, a lot of good statements in there, which I think are all applicable. Might want to consider adding something about the general street pattern in terms of new development. And we find that we learn a lot from the old way of doing things in a very gridded system, like you have in a good chunk of the community, is one of the most efficient layouts instead of doing these wiggly roads and cul-de-sacs and dead ends and things of that nature. So I think that's something that we'll want to consider adding into this section unless there's any real concern with that. You can't do it all the time. There may be some things that you need to work around in terms of wetlands or other features, but I think trying to reinforce that grid system, it disperses the traffic and otherwise you're just loading everybody onto one main artery, which causes congestion. Under the recommendations, T2, some of these are just questions as to whether or not you know these things were done. Modify the applicable land division ordinance to require execution of development agreement whenever public roads or other infrastructure is included. Can I assume that you have a standard development agreement that's utilized now?
I think
I don't know that it's standard. I would have to double check with Mr. Hirth about that, but I wouldn't say standard.
But it's something to that effect is typically part of the process now. Okay.
He does create one, but I don't know his method.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of different models in there. You can take them as far as you want, but just knowing that it is part of the process now. Same with T3, requiring major land divisions, conditional uses, and other substantial development projects to submit an assessment of potential transportation impact, including road damage. Is that more of a standard procedure now? Do you require traffic impact assessments and studies for new development?
I don't know as we've looked at that, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I'm not here to scold, by the way, just kind of check it. And if that's the case, it's something that we can keep in there and would probably be a good practice in certain situations. So we can probably give a little more guidance as to when those should be required.
I don't know if we did anyone out there for the Clot Road.
I wasn't involved with
the
it.
school being there,
Yeah.
when that subdivision went out there. I don't know. We talked about that, but I don't know of anything we've ever done about it. But the high school's right there and the subdivision just passed it.
Yeah.
I know it was talked about, but I don't know what ever happened with it.
A lot of times you're probably not going to have them done just for a residential subdivision. But certainly if you're looking at more extensive commercial or industrial, or depending on the location of the industrial and high traffic generator that draws concern, it may be something to keep in mind. So, all right. T5, we talked about official map. Also, T7 at the bottom, modified the land ordinance to require submittal of an area development plans that identify bicycle and pedestrian routes where appropriate. And again, with respect to newer subdivisions, is that something that you've been trying to push or require in terms of having them indicate?
Not that I know of.
Okay, so it's something maybe you could be a little stronger on. You know, sidewalks is one thing, but if we're talking just more, you know, maybe on the perimeter or a wood line area on the edge of the subdivision, you'd have some way to kind of connect through in that manner. Anybody else have any questions or concerns about any of the statements on that page 19? Anything else you want to add? On page 20, oh, there it is, recommendation T9, complete a parking study for downtown. So obviously you address some, like you said, with Main Street, but no full-blown study. And I think, you know, you're going to want to see how things go over the next number of years with changes and some of the improvements. And I would argue you probably don't need one unless things start getting really crazy, or you get a number of new businesses, or some of the space back here gets overhauled into something completely different. You might want to trigger, you know, getting a parking study done to see the impacts. So I think those were kind of the things that stood out to me in terms of questions. Maybe a few gaps in terms of direction, but overall, I think, you know, what was written roughly 10 plus years ago, I think is still very valid today. The question is, do you use some of these things in terms of when you're reviewing developments? And that's something that we can help out with in terms of implementation, and maybe providing a few tools that make this stuff a little more routine. I know it's not a habit just to pick up the comprehensive plan when you've got a subdivision in front of you and go item by item. Does it meet this? Does it meet that? It's cumbersome. So we'll see what we can do to provide some efficiencies there. Any questions, items regarding transportation? Again, this isn't the end all be all. You'll be able to chat more about these things as we continue with the plan process and we start pulling together drafts of the plan and other new recommendations. We'll certainly be highlighting for you where we make major changes in the element here. Hearing nothing, we can keep moving on at a good pace. We'll go to the agricultural, natural, and cultural resources element. This is one of the elements that, to me at least, kind of background in my career as an environmental planner, kind of stays close to my heart. But I think conceptually and from a logic standpoint, in order to figure out where you're going to grow, you need to know what you're going to protect and why you're protecting it. And I think folks have learned more and more, in communities have seen the impacts of inappropriate development on the environment and the negative impacts, a lot dealing with stormwater to a great degree, which has been addressed a lot more by communities than it ever has been before. So that's a good thing. But you've no doubt got a lot of resources within the city, near the city. We again have updated the inventory. Not a lot of things changed in Mother Nature that quickly, but where we could, we've included new and additional information. Page 5 with the non-metallic mine minerals and our 135 that had come up. I see I've got to fix a little formatting error on the bottom of that page. Watersheds, watershed-based planning. Trying to see if there's anything else in here that stuck in my mind that drew some questions. I don't think there's anything else critical that I felt needed to be pointed out. Again, if someone had read through this and if you spot some grammatical errors, some factual items, or question something, certainly let us know, whether it's at a meeting here or on the side or through Dave. But we're pretty sure all of this should be true and correct. Maps have been updated as well. So if there's nothing regarding the factual information at this point, we can move to page 23. We've got a set of trends there. A lot of those have not changed a great deal from the previous plan. We're expecting a lot of these trends to continue in terms of potential impacts on the variety of resources that are listed there. Obviously, there are things that are being done and can be done and continue to be done to protect those features. And we presume that you talk about some of those things as appropriate when development is proposed. Otherwise, page 26 is the start of the statements regarding goals and objectives. A couple of things I wanted to point out, even with that first one, objective 1A, it's nice. Again, this aligns fairly well with the land use element and the discussions we've had about housing and higher density housing. Speaks to it right there in terms of part of what could make you attractive and unique. So it reinforces that. You've got a statement in there encouraging growth of agriculture-related businesses and services in the community's commercial industrial areas. Again, this plan was done, 15 plus years ago. To your knowledge, has there been efforts? Have you naturally attracted or targeted agricultural-related businesses in the area, or have they declined and closed up and moved away? Any sense of that?
I can't think of anything, no.
Certainly not a bad goal to have and continue to have. You've got assets here that could be utilized by the ag industry, so keep that in there. Page 27, goal 3, objective 3B, statement about supporting data collection, monitoring efforts that further understanding of factors that influence groundwater. I'm guessing your wells are in pretty good shape. No issues with the aquifer. You've probably got a lot of areas of high groundwater here, given the wetlands, the river system, and other things. So I'm not sure if there's other groundwater related issues with respect to contributing to flooding, people's wet basements. Are there hot spots in areas that are groundwater centric?
We're looking to adopt a wellhead protection plan. So that'll sound going to be on our next agenda.
Okay. You had one in place previously, did you not? Or did you?
Yeah, they recommended that we updated it, so they reworked it. So
it's good to know. For those that aren't familiar, wellhead protection plan basically it helps identify potential contaminants within certain radius, as well as to some degree may dictate land use within those areas to protect the water going to the well. Goal 4 talks a lot about surface waters. I didn't see anything, at least through your website, that led me to believe that you had a lot of community-wide or sub-area stormwater planning plans done. Have you looked at large sections of the city or future growth areas in advance to really look at what could be done for stormwater?
I don't know.
Yeah, not recently.
Okay.
I mean, on small areas, I think we have, but not on a major level.
Okay.
Don't they usually do that at the development point? Isn't there a designated wetland area for, subdivisions and things? It's usually by design.
Typically, a lot of that will be designed to handle what's happening in the subdivision. But if you think about growth and the way it happens, you have this 20 acres developed, you got the next, the next 20 is going to go at some point. There's some benefits in terms of looking at it more holistically and broader to identify opportunities perhaps for one regional pond versus 4 or 5 smaller ponds from a maintenance standpoint, cost standpoint. There's also the notion of green infrastructure, which to some degree can help you avoid building ponds by using other water quality improvements, anything from green space buffers, stream buffers on corridors, rain gardens, individual homes, things of that nature. Of all my experience and the research and other things that I've read over the years, it still seems to be true while we practice, let's dig big holes in the ground to hold the water and then maintain it, that you're actually best managing water on site where it falls. So, you know, this block of residential behind us, instead of having storm sewers and pipes underground conveying it all, you'd be looking at regulations that would basically require them to hold that water or percentage of that water on site, rain barrels, rain gardens, finding ways to infiltrate it. So I'm not saying you're going to go across the whole city and require everyone to do that, but programs to do that, being proactive in terms of new development, new subdivisions, and encouraging, perhaps even requiring in certain instances, some of those kind of controls and green infrastructure be incorporated is going to cost you less in the long run than pipes in the ground and big holes in the ground.
Has there ever been any more investigation or looking at this concrete that was supposed to let water pass through it?
It is being used here and there. I haven't seen a lot of it. I see articles that come from all over the nation. I think Wisconsin obviously always has that issue of winter and cold and snow, which I think reduces the effectiveness of it compared to other places, and maybe the lifespan of it perhaps. But it's out there. It's a tool that can be used. I think it's a matter of finding the right situation. And I'm not going to pretend to be an engineer, obviously, but I think it's worth investigating. So, the plan itself does not reference or talk much about green infrastructure solutions. Is that something that you have interest in, that you may want to move that direction over time? Is that something that we should start alluding to in terms of some statements in the plan? And we can keep it pretty soft language.
I don't know as we've looked to that yet. I know nationally that's a big topic of discussion.
Being in the wetlands here, I mean, creating more on-site water, we kind of navigate against that for a simple reason of mosquitoes.
Well, yeah. No, and I mean, in terms of controlling things, even on your property, no, we're not talking about having standing water. That's going to be mosquitoes. You know, rain gardens will hold the water for a day and it releases it into the ground. So there's no time to do that. I can understand that. Well, it's something we can probably talk about a little more down the line. We can show you a few examples or maybe how we could integrate that in the plan and make sure it's something you're comfortable with. Again, we don't want to push you into areas that you're not wanting to go, but again, with the trends and the costs, I think that's something that's worth investigating. I didn't see anything much else on that page that raised questions or seem dated. Those things all, I think, are good statements. Page 28. Libraries. Forgot to reread the article when I came, but I just heard your library found a new home.
Yes.
Good. That's good. That's something that we'll obviously acknowledge when we do the community facilities section. We can take a look at any statements regarding that and make sure they're up to date. And the land use map as well, as far as where that new location is. So we may need to look at modifying the map. Under goal 7 and objectives talks about historical cultural sites. To my knowledge, I didn't find anything that you've got an official designated historic district. There was some information in the plan that alluded that there were some potential areas for the historic district, but am I correct that there is no official designated one?
Contacted the state and they said they didn't have anything on file for historic.
As far as a district, I mean, we have a historical society reservation.
But we could probably move toward that.
They used to have a tour and stuff of historical houses.
Yeah. That's what I was.
Yeah, that's
what I was talking about. The library, or not the library, the
Museum.
the museum is part of it. The what the heck am I thinking? The movie theater.
They had a tour of houses and stuff, went up on Wyman Street and stuff one time. That was a number of years ago. I don't know if they'd still do that or not.
You didn't see they got plaques on them.
Yeah.
Part of it.
Yeah.
there's some increased acknowledgement about some of the historic resources, but, you know, if a district is formed, that usually comes with some baggage, if you will, in terms of do's and don'ts and regulations. So some communities don't want to go that far. If you're acknowledging it, that's great, but it may do little to protect any buildings or homes or things out there that are historic and could be torn down.
And I do believe that is a fact because doing our reconstruction of downtown, that is a topic with the movie theater.
Okay, okay.
I know years ago, the Historical Society was involved, and because of the way some of our buildings were treated, sandblasting or something, that kept them from being designated truly historical.
They were
sites.
modified, altered, of that nature, yeah.
Mhm. And there was, you know, a lot of that had happened, so.
Well, certainly I think, you know, the history that you have here, the architecture, the buildings, you know, whether it's some old houses in the neighborhoods or downtown is really an asset. And that's what people want when they're moving to a community or visiting a community is sort of that quaintness and that variety. So I think certainly the statements that you have in here are good. We'll take a closer look at that, given some of the initial emphasis on history as an important thing, and see if there's other things that we can come up with that can help assure those things remain. Whether you want to take it to the nth degree is really up to you as a community, but we can at least throw some options out there. Move on to page 29. The policies, the city position, the city directive. One thing I'll go back and take a look at, it's not part of this chapter. Typically it'll be in economic development, but ANC 2, the cleanup and reuse of brownfield sites. There's information out there in inventories, and we'll want to take a look at that. We can include information or a map where those brownfield sites are, at least the known ones, and certainly have a sense of which ones have been cleaned up and which ones have not been addressed. And so those oftentimes are good targets for redevelopment, and there's funding available through a variety of agencies to help clean up those sites and get them you know, into a usable state. I don't think it's a huge problem here, but it's something that we definitely want to look at. Has there been any recent brownfield experiences that any of you are aware of? Have grants been sought? Have cleanup done on properties? A little bit.
I don't know of any
Just
as far as brownfield. What's that?
Beacon Street Apartments.
Simmons,
There was brownfield down there,
yeah.
Was there?
and that was taken care of. It was an oil dump site, and it was taken care of, and that's part of the Beacon Street Apartments.
One down. How many more to go? We don't know, but I said we'll dig into that and see what the situation is. Number of statements there about stormwater mentioned before, and again here I think, you know, perhaps looking at being proactive, discerning regional versus on-site versus natural stormwater management is something that we can play around with as part of this, and see if we can come up with some language that moves more in that direction. Under city directive policies, ANC 8, I've seen a couple of statements here that lead me to suggest that we probably want to take a look at the periphery of the city, and gateways into the community can be very important, and obviously from an image standpoint, those can be handled a little differently in terms of land use. Many times a community will create overlay zoning districts for gateway areas that have maybe additional or special controls on them. So you're controlling that architecture and the look of things as you come into town in these gateways. So I know there was some reference to that a little bit, but not very strong. Is that something that you feel is important to the community and maybe could use some enhancement?
Yeah.
I mean, depending on which way you come into the community, you got a variety of experiences.
I would think so. Yeah.
Page 30, development review criteria. These are something I can talk a little more with Dave and Chad about, but you know, I think a lot of these statements are pretty good. Whether or not these things are actually addressed as development proposals come forth is probably another question in terms of, are these things implemented? What tools are you using? Which ones aren't you using? And how do those things get done? You know, I looked at, I think, statement number 14, ANC 14, and thought maybe we could pull back on that. It sounds like a panacea that just encompasses everything and will result in perfect development. You can get all of that out of one development. Great. So, under the recommendations question I had, it suggested modifying the zoning and land division ordinances to better achieve protection of natural resources and green space. Any sense on whether changes have been made to improve or increase the amounts of green space that are dedicated? Do you typically just, in lieu of green space, do you have them contribute to a park fund?
I think that's something that we could look at though.
Yeah, we're finding that even small green spaces are important, and a lot of communities will end up having, you know, 3 or 4 subdivisions go in and then kind of think, well, we need a park in this area, and then kind of go retrofit, or it's on the burden of the next subdivision landowner to provide the space for that park. There's ways to deal with it financially so it's fair, but we're finding that even within a typical subdivision, 20, 30 acres that are done at a time, there's value in even taking one lot out of there and making it a green space. Sometimes it can be called a pocket park, a top lot, something that is truly walkable by the folks that live in there, especially with small children. It doesn't have to be extensive, maybe a little bit of play equipment or a sandbox, but having those kinds of spaces, we see are becoming more and more important. So depends on your regulations, what you require and how much you can push on that. But that's something we can take a look at. And if you want to be stronger on that, we can make some suggestions.
Let's say I don't know about our ordinance, but we do encourage that when we talk to the developers.
Okay.
I know with one of the developers that we had, there was a discussion and they are creating a green space within. And then that's also spawning off onto others city happenings that we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, it's the opportunity to also get some linkages between green spaces as well. So it sounds like you're moving in that direction, which is good. But again, we can take a look and see if there's anything that can be done to enhance that. Next page, page 31, last page here. Really a lot more questions than answers. Again, no real concern with the statements that are here, but many of them really just beg the question, were these things completed or not? We just talked about creation of a historic preservation district. Obviously, that's probably still on the list. Nothing's been done. So can keep that there. You have done some work in pursuing development of economic area plans, even that riverfront visioning. Is part of that, updating the your comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, I would argue, as part of economic development and planning for some of those quality of life aspects. So that's good. Main Street designation, to your knowledge, has the community sought a Main Street designation through WEDC? Has any attempt been made to do that? Is that a program that folks have been interested in?
I think many, many years ago, but I don't know it's anything recent.
Yeah, I've not heard of that.
And if I'm correct, I don't believe you have an official business improvement district for downtown either. That's really privately funded by the businesses.
We have a facade program.
Facade for the city, okay. Sometimes those can be done by a business improvement district. A lot of business improvement districts will use those pool dollars to do more landscaping treatments and flower baskets or new benches and some of those things. Sometimes they use it for events, you know, and programming as well. But But I don't think there is an official district where they all chip in as businesses.
No. Nothing that I'm aware of.
The chamber really works hard at trying to be all things to all people
Okay.
in a small town. So.
Well said, Donna. Well said.
And that's a good point to bring up too, is there's capacity limitations. You can't be involved in everything. You can't have 7 different things and expect people to be part of it. So if the chamber plays a very strong role in doing some of those things, yeah, you may not need the business improvement district.
To capitalize on what Donna said, we here in New London are very fortunate with our chamber. They do an exceptional job.
And we'll probably be chatting with them too before we finish off the economic development element, because we'll want to get a little insight from them. So good to know. Number of statements here about conducting inventories of scenic views and view sheds and identifying areas of community character. I'm going to presume that probably nothing has been done on that. They're good ideas, and I don't think they're often done by communities. And you don't know the value of these places until somebody wants to change it, and then people come out of the woodwork. Mm-hmm. So I think those are some things that we can keep on the list. And there's some opportunities to do that. I would argue graduate students are perfect for those types of small projects. And so we can maybe try and match up a little better how some of these things could be done, or who should be leading the charge on some of these. A lot of plans in the implementation element will take these recommendations and list them out and give some responsibility to an entity so they can kind of have a bit of a work program, if you will. Site design review, you've got design review provisions, I believe, in your ordinance, certain types of development that invoke that. And so you're looking at the landscaping, the details on the parking, and those types of things. Have there been problems with that? Have there been shortcomings to that? Works pretty good. Okay. Mentioned the overlay district, community entrance. So obviously nothing's been accomplished on that, but again, I think it's a good idea and something that we can reiterate. Number of statements about some periodic surveys of historical archaeological resources. Probably time to do that, or maybe find some assistance and funding through the State Historical Society. You can often get those things done. And then the last one there I thought was interesting as well, using overlay zoning to protect cultural resources. Not sure if that's something that's still interested in. We could certainly take a look and probably provide some models of what that could look like. But again, your underlying zoning and land use regulations would take precedent. But in an area, and I'll just use downtown as an example, you could create an overlay that might pile on, you know, a few additional restrictions and do's and don'ts and things that are and are not allowed within that district. So if you're seeing changes to the buildings and stuff over time that really don't mesh with your thinking of what downtown should look like in terms of it being historic, that type of overlay approach can work quite often. And again, you can be fairly weak with it. You can be fairly strong with it.
That's exactly what we're working through right now in the downtown revitalization.
Is it? Okay.
And then here at the Planning Commission, we've also come through with a lot of that too, as far as some of the requests that have come for facing of the buildings down there, looking at our ordinances in conflicts with that, from our ordinances being in the 70s and 80s compared to now with different materials and such.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some of those materials you really don't want to see on the buildings nowadays. That's good. Anyone have any other thoughts or questions, concerns about any of the language that's in there, or the things that we've discussed a little bit? It's been helpful to me and gives me a lot to chew on and how we might be able to modify some of these statements. But I want to make sure I'm not doing all the talking here and you guys have a chance to get your thoughts out. All right. We're about right on time for where I hope to be. Last thing is draft survey. Did this get sent out beforehand or not?
The draft survey?
Yeah, I brought copies.
Okay.
Based on some standard surveys that we've used in numerous communities, and then factoring in some of the discussion we've had up to this point and results from the SWOT analysis, we took a stab here at trying to pull together a relatively short survey that can be used to be put out there to get citizen input. Got a couple other extras here. Want to read along? Practice, you'll be all prepared for the survey when it's ready. But the intent would be to use the survey through part of this process to touch on a number of different aspects of land use and land use related issues. We would look at using a device like SurveyMonkey. So this would be online, it would be mobile friendly. We can talk with Chad about different ways to promote that. I think in general, based on timing, we might want to look at shooting for having a survey available somewhere around mid-July and let it go for about 6 weeks through the end of summer, which, you know, if you let things go for more than 6 weeks, if people didn't do anything with it in 6 weeks, they're not going to do anything in 7 or 8 weeks. So we could be very upfront about what the deadline is. But as much as we like to try and keep these surveys to about 20 questions, it's very difficult to do. And so this one has 26 questions. I think it's something that someone could still fill out fairly quickly. We've got a couple of base demographic kind of questions for background, age range, how long you lived here. You have children, some open-ended questions on strengths and weaknesses or areas that need improvement. And then a number of questions on housing. And this, I think, is going to give a little more insight into the things that we've talked about in the past of, you know, what are people living in now, what type of housing, the costs of housing, and what they think the needs are in the city over the next 10 years. And we tried to expand this list to, instead of just single family, multifamily, or mobile home, trying to include more of the mix of that missing middle housing that we've talked about, to see what the response is going to be. Well, I hate adding more questions. One that I thought of after the fact here is it might be appropriate to add another question here, just asking people, do you plan to downsize in the next 10 years? Because you do have an aging population. You've got folks that are living in homes that are too big for them or will be in 10 years and probably unsure whether the right type of housing is going to be available where they can still stay in the community. So I think asking that question could give some insights. If you feel.
I think number 13 and 20 can be combined and blacked out. I mean, that's something we deal with every day with our constituents as far as, I can say we've talked about each and every one of them.
Well, we can certainly eliminate ones if you feel that those questions are asked or you're in touch with those things in the community.
I think we're definitely in touch with it.
Okay.
I think I would still like to see number 20 on there, but with 13, it's kind of covered by number 20. I guess you'd get the whole scope in there. And maybe add that, you know, particular question to it or like, you know, where it says streets, maybe put a check box next to that as far as good, bad, or ugly.
Yep, we could give them a range or a spectrum.
Right.
They could indicate on a range of 1 to 5, for example, on any of these.
That would just shorten it up a little bit, you know.
Fair. No,
look at 26 questions to 25.
Yeah. Do we still want to add a question about intent to downsize in the housing though?
I think so. I think that's a good.
Could be an eye
interest. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not very complicated.
that's a good thing to capture, whether people are downsizing, that gives you an idea of what kind of population you're gonna have and housing and.
Some basic questions about land use development and growth, perceived, amounts and rates of growth. Usually get a wide variety of answers there. And then you get some folks that say, I live here, I got mine, and I don't want anyone to have what I got. So close the door. More prevalent in Door County than here, probably. Cultural, natural resources, a few questions about protection and historic artifacts. Transportation, we just talked about, we'll take out 13, we can cover that in number 20. Certainly more expanded version of mobility in 14.
Did you say take out 20?
No, we'll take out 13.
Oh,
We'll
13, yeah.
incorporate that into
Okay, yeah.
20, yeah. And then economic development, we thought it was important here, besides some of the very broad questions, to really ask some specifics about folks traveling and doing their shopping in the Fox cities or going to Wapaka or somewhere a little larger and close by. So hoping that you'd agree with the way we've got number 17 structured. And then the follow-up about if they had more things in your community, would it reduce the amount of times they do that shopping? And then, of course, being a little more specific on what they feel needs to be improved or the types of businesses. So, those will help get to the heart of some of those questions in your mind. 20, we talked about just briefly. We can enhance that with scale. And then a question related to redevelopment of underutilized lands. And we kept this fairly general. Blight can come in all shapes and sizes. Some could be in a downtown. A lot of times lands adjacent to a downtown are selected. Corridors. You do have some aging buildings and structures on some of your corridors, so people can kind of give their preferences there. Community facilities, we really didn't add a lot of questions about all the other services that you provide. I think, as you mentioned, things are generally high quality and not a lot of concern with police and fire and other things. We can add questions in there, but we thought it better to focus on those quality of life issues with park and recreation and access to the Wolf River. You feel that's appropriate. And then just one question on intergovernmental cooperation. I don't expect all the citizens to be terribly savvy about knowing how one community works with another or other units of government. We probably don't want to think about that stuff. But I think it's important, recently, speaking of resiliency, is dealing with the natural disasters, emergency management types of things when responses and quick responses are needed. So getting a feel for that, I think, would be helpful. And then plan implementation, really drawing off some of the concerns you noted in the SWOT analysis about general lack of participation and apathy. So a few questions about communication and methods of communication.
Could we put a line item on that question for suggested means?
Certainly.
Because I get a lot of right now that we don't communicate good enough, but then I follow that up. Well, here's what we do. What do you suggest?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. It's a good place to do that and just ask them straight out.
Right.
You're gonna have to be going out and doing mine in front of someone's house.
Might not like what you're gonna hear.
Well, I mean, if they're able to tell us, then maybe we can change something or improve something. Some things we just can't do or not affordable or whatever, but let's see, maybe there's something that we're missing.
It's tough to do any of your jobs when you don't have that input, and I'm sure you all feel like, are we doing the right thing here? And we don't know because nobody's telling us. One approach is silence is approval. People were concerned they'd be here, but you think that too strong, you're going, no, that can't be true. Someone can't like this. So it's a challenge.
I explore a lot, and a big one is put it in a newspaper. When I did a request on that, and the numbers to put an ad in the newspaper through the city formally is astronomical, you know, and we're already talking about tax dollars, and you know that as far as what we already have, that just wasn't feasible. So what else do you suggest? And we've come up with a lot of things that we've investigated, so that would be a good. I'm interested on that one.
Do you guys do stuff with your utility bills?
There has been
where you stuff some other piece of information in there.
There has been some in the past, and that was also one request on that as well. So Jay and I have also
do have that
discussed
resource. We have a business that puts inserts in, so we can be reached out to, and we can easily add that to the utility bills if needed.
It seems to be a fairly efficient way to do things in a community. You've got everyone's address, and they got to open that bill, so they might glance at something before they throw it away.
The link to the survey.
Yeah. Well, and that might be one of the things we want to consider for promotion. I've got that on the list that we can discuss later with Dave and Chad about how we do that. So this is, like I said, the first cut at the survey. We definitely wanted you to have a look at it. We got some good quick suggestions and changes here, and I can make those and resend this out. But I think, you know, we want to double check with you and give you a little longer than just 10 minutes here to look at it and think about it. So keep the copy they gave you, review them, see if you've got any other concerns or questions. I'll make some edits to it, and I'll get that to Dave or Chad, and they can redistribute it to you. We're not going to take a vote on this, but we'll take the approach. If you've got any critical objections or concerns on any questions, just reach out to Dave, and we'll try and address those items. If we don't hear from you, we'll assume that you're comfortable with the survey, but we'll move forward and see if we can hit the target of having it available for July 15th. I'll work with Chad and Dave on that. We'll work on some promotion efforts and opportunities, and then I think putting it on your heads as well as plan commissioners and representing the community. Do everything that you can. Talk to your neighbors, mention it when you're down at the corner bar having fish fry, but just ask people to give input. It's their best opportunity and probably easiest opportunity. So any questions, conversation, discussion on this? Otherwise, we're done with what I wanted to get through at least.
Thank you.
As far as the next meeting that we have, I can talk with Dave and Chad, but whether we come back in July or August, sort of immaterial. That's with my schedule, but we'll basically have a few more chapters to go through similar to what we did now. And I can at least give you an update on where things are at with the survey. It should be out by then. We'll have an idea of how many respondents so far, whether things went quick and dropped off or what. We won't have results until fall, but give you an indication. So.
Does anybody have anything else for him? Otherwise, I want to thank you, and I'm sorry about last month that we had a little hiccup.
It doesn't happen that often to me. I think maybe 2 or 3 times in my career. Luckily, close to home instead of an hour and a half away. So.
I want to thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time and patience and attention, and we'll see you next time we see you.
Okay, thanks again.
Enjoy the weekend.
Yep.
Thank you.
Dave, you want that authorization staff? You got that yours?
Yeah, currently, the state does our commercial electrical permits and inspections. We're looking to take that in-house so that we're full service for all permits and inspections. So we've
Who would be designated to do that then?
Kunkel Engineering, John.
Is he, what qualifications does he have?
He's certified. He's got all his certifications, so.
Is that a certification that you're going to acquire?
I'm probably not going to get the commercial electrical. That takes like 6 years.
Oh, okay.
And I plan retiring before that.
Absolutely.
So Kunkel Engineering, we're going to keep them on board probably for the next at least 3, 4, 5 years. He's already been performing these. We didn't realize till just recently when the other state inspector showed up at the school to do an inspection. So I reached out to the state, and he said it wasn't a big deal. He sent me all the forms to get those filled out. We've already approved Chapter 316 of the state Department of Safety and Professional Services.
So when the state does that, who gets charged?
The state has them pull a permit. It'll be cheaper for them to go through us, but it'll also create some revenue for us as well. So, like I said, we've been doing them anyway. So it makes sense just to bring them on board so that we can handle all that in-house. And I'm sure we're a lot more responsive than the state is. They're kind of backed up on their
Does
plan
it put
review and
more
stuff.
work on your shoulders?
No, because Kunkel does those for me. I'm not an electrical inspector.
Sure. So, I mean, it doesn't add any work to
No.
anybody here?
And a lot of times he's there doing the plumbing and other inspections anyway. So it really isn't, I think it just makes sense to add them on.
So
So
if we're having Kunkel doing it, we're paying him to have it done.
not else any more than what we're paying him now. Like I said, he's been doing them right along. So we're going to renegotiate. Now that I've got more certifications, we're going to sit down with Kunkel and work out something that they can live with. But it looks like they're going to stay on board at least, the next 3, 4, 5 years.
So if they start doing more of these, they're not going to charge us more?
We can cover it with our fee schedule anyway.
We can cover it.
Like I said, the electrical fee portion of that more than covers any other additional fees that they charge. So, and we'd still be about half of what the state charges. So it'd be better for our citizens too, to have a
So they
little
would be
cheaper.
able to pay less and it's not going to cost the city
No,
more?
nope.
They work with
It'll,
you,
it'll
Jay?
act,
How often does Kunkel come to do those inspections? Because that was a concern.
they're probably here a couple times a week, especially with Becker, with the stuff going on, because that's all commercial, because it's more than 2 units.
He works
So
with
they-
you then, Jay. They associate with Jay or connect with Jay when they're doing this stuff or not? Or don't you just have
Generally,
to?
no, we wait for approval from them, so they would notify us before we would do any connection electrically.
Oh.
Is
Yeah, so
there any time restrictions? Say a contractor is out there working and they get their end of the deal done and they're asking for an inspection. Kunkel can't get there. Is there any time lapse that happens that then that
Yeah.
contractor can go ahead and move forward if they don't come and inspect?
In the state codes, they allow up to, I think it's 24 hours. So, or 48 hours, excuse me. We try to get there within 24. Most of the contractors, we just say, hey, can you give us at least a day heads up? It doesn't always happen that way. And a lot of times I can do the inspections, but on the commercial stuff, they've got someone in the area at least 2-3 times a week. So it works out pretty well. So we try to schedule those for Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Do you know what kind of delays they're having through the state?
On the plan review, they're 5-6 weeks right now. For electric, they've got more than they can handle. So I don't know if they're holding people up or not, because they're obviously going through them. So I don't know what the wait is, but I could probably find out. But here, it wouldn't be more than a day or two at the very most, and more likely a day. And then sometimes even the same day. So if they're here doing other inspections, we just add that on. So,
So you want the board's blessing on,
pardon?
you want the board's blessing for the
I
authorizing
do.
this?
Chad probably thought it would be a better idea to get a recommendation from one of the boards, and I think this board has,
Jay,
pretty good.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No.
You can finish.
No, I'm just saying, I think this board, with the group that we have here, would be able to make a informed decision on whether that'd be the right move. So we're looking to get approval from this board to send it to the alderman.
And Jay, you don't have any issues with that?
I know one of the city's concerns before is we fielded quite a few calls with Kunkel Engineering not being able to properly get all the permits done. That's why Dave was hired, and that's why we brought that back in-house. So I don't know that it's going to be that efficient. I don't know. I mean, the process, if it falls on the state and they're responsible, the city, doesn't bear that burden then. So I don't have a direct answer for you if that's the right answer for the city or not.
That's where I was gonna go with it. I know I've fielded some calls from contractors, not on the commercial side of it, but same aspects.
Recently, or just over time?
Within the last 6 months,
Last what?
6 months or so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been kind of fielding most of those calls. I think some of the contractors are still calling them directly. But I'm real comfortable with John. He does a very good job for us. And like I said, he's got all the certifications. A lot of times he's there doing a plumbing inspection anyway, because they're doing their finals on plumbing, mechanical, electrical. So if he's there doing the commercial ones anyway, it just makes sense to do the electrical at the same time and not necessarily have to have people go to the state for this part of their permit and then come to us for everything else. So I haven't had people calling in saying that we're missing inspections or not be able to get a hold of somebody. But like I said, if they're calling Kunkel,
Shouldn't the state be?
because Randy hasn't been real responsive in the last few weeks because they brought on somebody else. But as far as I know, John's been following up with everything. So I haven't heard that that's not taking place. So I guess I'd like to know if someone's reaching out and saying that we're not meeting, things that that's definitely something I want to get corrected. So we want to be very proactive and
So we are doing the inspections now, or?
we
the
have
state
been.
is?
And then I guess
But we're
Kunkel
not
didn't
all-
realize that we didn't have our designation. We do for everything else, commercial and all that.
Some people going to the state for approval and some people going to us.
Well, I think we've been actually issuing permits too for commercial electric, not knowing that and I didn't know, I just assumed we were too, but. And the gentleman from the state that handles that, they're pretty overburdened too. They just, as soon as we take it over anyway. And I think with Kunkel and John, I don't think it'd have a negative impact on our department or the citizens for that matter.
So my last question would be is if we do implement this and we do see a problem with it, how hard is it to go back?
You can step out at any time. You just send them a letter 30 days before you want to end it, and the same as before, and they'll just take it over. So say, I retired tomorrow or had a health issue, you could just reach out to them and, within 30 days, they'd take that back over. So, yeah, so you're not necessarily tied to it if we agreed to do it.
When would the state have gotten that back? Because Paul was, he was qualified for that at one point to do the commercial.
I
We went-
don't
we
know
went to-
any of the history on how this came
When he
about.
was- When he
Well, we-
resigned, that's when we.
We
initially
went some
got-
time without someone
Yeah.
and that's when we went to Kunkel and I would assume,
We had another individual and he passed away.
yep.
And I guess that was
Real quick.
not a real good time for the city.
Right.
I heard a lot of negative feedback, so they like having someone in the office that they can reach out to. So,
Yeah, the department and situation have definitely gotten better.
Do you have a number of how many commercial permits we process?
I do. I don't have that in here, but I keep track of all that. I've got a spreadsheet and it's pretty detailed. So, and then also when we get that new software, everybody here that wants it'll have access to that stuff. You can look up anything you need to look up. So,
Well, and what you're asking us is to do the city in London will complete commercial electrical inspections.
Yep.
So if it doesn't work out with this group, we can always go to another electrician, right?
oh,
Yeah, well,
if
we-
Kunkel,
It's we're
We could
designated-
contract another firm to do
Yeah.
that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
So I mean, it's not like by saying we're approving this, that we're marrying ourselves to this.
yeah, we
elect-
basically recommending it to the,
It comes to us as far as the city and then we subcontract that out is what
Yeah.
we're doing.
Okay.
Obviously, we're going to be more efficient than the state.
Oh,
That's the goal.
than-
That's the
than
goal.
Yeah.
Providing that service to the people. And we really don't want to hold up commercial projects by
Right.
waiting for state approval.
Is there liability worries in that? So if,
Well, it would fall back on Kunkel. I mean, they're the.
Yeah, they're
gonna be
insured.
The entity that's responsible for that underneath the city. So
Good question.
Well, we're looking for a motion just to authorize staff. Is that,
we're looking for a recommendation from the
Okay.
planning commission to move this to the council.
I would look for a recommendation we vote on that, just vote on it. We don't need a motion or a second. or
We need a
anything.
motion and a second
Oh, we
and a
do,
vote.
okay. I'd look for a motion to authorize staff to complete the process to designate the city of New London to complete commercial and electrical inspections.
I'll
with
make that
Kunkel.
motion. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This would go to council then, huh?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything on upcoming events? Dave?
Other than the wellhead protection plan, there was a younger gentleman that reached out to us, and they're recommending that we update ours. It's a little aged.
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
There's a member he's a member of the Water Association, and he approached us. He actually saved the utility about $50,000. This is a pretty involved study. And because we're a member of that organization, they provided this for us at no charge. So something also that's required by the DNR. So that's why we're adopting this. We've had one before. We were required for our new well. If you remember, the council approved that wellhead protection at one point for well number 8. That was the upgrade from well number 4. When we had to drill a new well there on Oshkosh Street, that is our largest producing well. We get about 900 gallons a minute out of that well. We had a wellhead protection established for that. And then this individual approached us and said, I can complete that for you at no charge. So the utilities and the ratepayers are saving about $50,000 to $60,000 to have that study done.
Perfect.
So he's going to provide that to us at no charge.
So I have his final draft, so I'll bring that to our next meeting to put on the agenda.
I'd like to start tackling that ordinance, the blight ordinance, and some of the issues that we discussed.
Okay.
Fence, I think that one, every month we have fences on there. I think we need to take a good stab at that and move forward on it.
Yeah, I think we
Clear
need
up.
to change that because the chain link fence doesn't accommodate our current ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
So every time we approve a chain link fence, we're actually making, that recommendation out of what our compliance is for our ordinance, which has always been a concern of ours. We've talked about this several times with the fences.
We have a lot of work ahead of us. I'm wondering if we ought to do 3, 4, 5 short-term zoning amendments while we're working on a new zoning code. And I think Chad said it makes sense to hire someone to come in and just revamp our entire zoning code. But I'm wondering if some of the bullet points that were, like he said, fences and different ones,
Oh,
if
yeah.
we put 3 or 4 of them as amendments and to carry us through until we, because it
I
might take
agree.
a year to get the zoning ordinance, zoning
agree.
code redone.
And that we can do that. We can
I'll
definitely.
put that
look at-
together.
and look
for
at each
one of our future
zoning
meetings,
or
so.
we can look at each ordinance.
Yep.
And make them amendments.
So dealing with accessory structures would probably be one. Fence would obviously be another one. Trying to think, I think there's a couple more
The blight,
blight that we should probably look at as
For me,
well.
that's
I
top
wanted to bring up
priority.
For discussion was we approve a lot of murals. Would there be an option for us to have a subcommittee to the planning commission to look at the subjective murals and do pre-approvals for us? So we wouldn't have
Already
to
come here.
approve. We would only see the controversial ones that come to us. We could even have members of the art league form that just to see if there's an objective view. So we wouldn't have to field so many. I know that was a concern for some of the people sitting on the planning commission was when we view, we go through this approval process and we spend a lot of time to approve 30 or 40 murals at a time. And then there's a couple of them that certain individuals don't find approval for. Would that be an option that somebody wants to think of?
Well, and murals are being done that are not
Well,
coming through this committee.
well, could only have 2 on that. Because otherwise you have quorum.
So if you are seeing murals going up that you don't think you've seen here, we need to know
No,
about
unless
those.
I'm forgetting, I know that on the Washington Center, we talked about those 3 murals and the fact that there was a window and maybe something should be done there, and those are done. The murals are,
So we'll have to take a look at that.
Didn't we approve the ones for Washington Center?
no,
Yeah.
I thought we approved the.
Yeah, they were approved in some
Yeah,
minutes
we
that I read.
we approved the
Yeah.
Washington Center ones. They're on the
Yeah.
old furnace building there or whatever.
I thought that was because Susie said it never went through the Washington Center committee.
Oh,
Well, it might-
that could be.
I
Yeah.
don't
Might not
know
have
about
gone through
that.
them,
Yeah.
but it,
Yeah.
It was, we
So-
approved it at a couple months ago, I think. it
yeah, I
was.
saw it in the
Sure.
meeting minutes.
Yeah.
But with that said, to comment off of you, that subcommittee can only be 2 people off of our committee.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, and did we ever approve the mural that's going down the side of that bar there, and, you know, that's
Which bar?
the corner thing.
Oh, this guy
one
over here?
Yeah,
I'm not sure about that one.
I'm always seeing, I don't remember seeing,
If it did happen before I came, I don't know.
I don't remember that one, no. We've had so many of them that you can't
Yeah.
remember them all.
well.
But we could also have council members that aren't on there, but then again, you can only have 2 of them.
Right.
So,
Should we look in at the next council meeting, ask if there's anybody that's interested in,
well, what I'm
Two
saying is
people?
if we're to develop a subcommittee, you can only have 2 from this committee, otherwise you're gonna have quorum.
Yeah.
And then if any of them are councilmen, you can only have 2 of them as well.
Yeah.
As a walking quorum. So I don't know if that's really a
viable option for it.
Yeah.
viable, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
good idea, but maybe it won't work.
You get
My
the
thought
open-
process is I like everybody's opinions here. We see them, it takes us, I think 10, 15 minutes to go through them, discuss them. We've had only a few of them
There's
that
been a
we've had.
fraction that we.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine.
Sooner or later,
That's
it's
all I
gonna
have.
slow down because just about everything's painted, they can be painted, so.
Well,
Review-
yeah, that's getting a little off topic, but, yeah.
We're gonna
So-
review our next meeting date.
$28.
Yeah.
Work for everybody, 28? then?
Look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Made by Merrick, seconded by Donna. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I wanted to ask you too,